We recently hit 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, so to celebrate and thank you all, we're going to answer some of your questions in a Q&A about TLDR next week. So if you have a question, tweet us at @TLDRNewsUK. If you don't have a Twitter account, you're also welcome to email us. Our address is hello@tldrnews.co.uk, and make sure you use the subject line Q&A. In this video we're going to be talking about Article 218 and what are known as mixed agreements. Now this might sound like a bit of a niche topic, but if we're going to end up with some kind of free trade deal with the EU, it's going to end up being quite important. Most of the Brexit debate at the moment has been centred around Article 50 and the withdrawal agreement. From the debate so far, we can see how the withdrawal agreement is going to define the future relationship between the UK and EU. First there'll be a transition period, and then an indefinite backstop if no future trading relationship can be agreed by then. However, Article 50 is actually only supposed to cover the UK's departure from the EU, and not its future relationship. Article 50 says that the withdrawal agreement should take account of the framework for its future relationship with the Union. However, most of the future relationship is supposed to be negotiated once the 2 years after triggering Article 50 have passed. In fact, if the withdrawal agreement contained too much information about the future relationship, it could be invalidated by the European Court of Justice, and some people think the existing agreement should have been. The article that actually defines a third country's relationship with the EU is Article 218 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, or TFEU. Article 218 basically describes how the EU negotiations will take place, and how a deal will be agreed. According to the article, the European Commission and the Council of the EU will jointly appoint a negotiator, a new Michel Barnier, and maybe a special committee to oversee the negotiations. During the negotiations, Article 218 states that the European Parliament must be kept immediately and fully informed. This wasn't always the case, but a new European precedent was set during the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership negotiations, also known as TTIP. This is when members of the European Parliament pressured the Commission into granting access to all confidential documents relating to the negotiations. Once the negotiations are over, Article 218, Clause 8, states that the Council must agree the deal by a qualified majority. That means 72% of the 27 member states, so 20 of the EU 27, need to vote in favour of the agreement, and these countries must represent at least 65% of the total population of the EU. However, it might not be this simple if the UK really wants the kind of comprehensive trade deal that UK politicians have been talking about. If the deal were to affect the EU's budget, then according to Clause 6 of Article 218, any such deal would have to be ratified by MEPs. Furthermore, if it's what's called a mixed agreement, that means it will have to be agreed by all 38, yes 38 national assemblies of the EU. So what is a mixed agreement? Well, basically it's a trade deal, which includes sectors that the EU can't legislate for on behalf of its member states. It needs to ask them for explicit approval. In May 2017, there was a landmark ruling on this by the European Court of Justice, known as the Singapore ruling. It said that the EU had exclusive competence, i.e. they don't need to ask member states' approval, when it comes to goods and services, including all transport services, and in the fields of public procurement and energy generation from sustainable non-fossil sources, direct foreign investments of third country nationals in the EU and vice versa, intellectual property, competition, sustainable development, and rules related to the exchange of information and to obligations governing notification, verification, cooperation, mediation, transparency and dispute settlements between the parties, unless those rules relate to the field of non-direct foreign investment. Now, you don't need to know what all of those things mean to understand that the EU has executive competency over quite a bit. For the most part, the EU can legislate on anything it likes, as long as it gets a qualified majority by the European Council. However, the EU requires ratification by all national assemblies if the agreement has anything to do with non-direct foreign investment or portfolio investments, investor protection, or investor-state dispute settlement mechanisms. These might sound like areas of a trade agreement which are relatively trivial compared to goods and services, but they can cause a real headache. In 2016, the Belgian region of Wallonia took issue with the investor-state dispute settlement mechanisms in the EU-Canada deal, called CETA. The Wallonian Parliament is one of Belgium's 7 national assemblies, which represents about 0.6% of the population of the EU. However, because CETA was a mixed agreement, it required the approval of all 38 national assemblies within the EU, which meant that this relatively small parliament effectively had a veto on the whole deal. In his recent letter to Theresa May before the vote on her deal, Juncker said that the EU would provisionally apply any UK trade deal, like they did with CETA. This basically means that if the UK-EU trade deal covers any of the areas which require ratification by all of the EU national assemblies, which it almost certainly will, then the EU will apply the rest of the deal provisionally while they wait for the ratification by the member states. The deal would still have to be approved by all 38 national assemblies, but the UK wouldn't have to wait for all the legislation to go through. So while May's deal might be struggling and might be failing in the House of Commons, she still has bigger problems down the road. Even if the ECJ doesn't invalidate her current deal, she still has a lot of issues related to the future relationship to iron out, and a lot of approvals to seek. Even if you do like the idea of a hard Brexit, it's difficult to deny that the UK will need some future relationship with the EU. So it's easy to see that the UK government's biggest difficulties might still be lying ahead. I know we have 100,000 subscribers now, but why stop there? 250,000 is within our reach. So make sure you subscribe to our videos, and if you've done that already, press the notification bell so you never miss any of our videos. Also, you can follow us across all of the social networks simply by searching for TLDR News.